So if anyone doesn't know me, I'm Stephen. I'm teaching. My day job is I'm a professional teacher. Okay, it sounds better when you say it that way. Okay, I teach at a middle school math. I've taught other subjects before in the past, but I just enjoy math the most. And I couldn't teach PE, so I teach math. Now I teach in a different district. I'm in Gaston County Schools. I've been there for quite a while, and it's interesting. After you've taught for a while, your reputation starts to get out there, and people get to the point where they stop telling you what to do. Okay, so I can pretty much teach whatever I want because they've seen results and that students grow in the classroom. So rarely do I have someone come to my class and say, you're doing it wrong, okay? Or they say, you need to do this. Now, I'm not saying I'm a rebel, but I do use various teaching techniques. And so sometimes on Sunday, I like to do things a little different also. And I've been using the same slides, okay, since sometime last year, okay? Well, I think it's time to change that, okay? So I'm going to change the slides today. I don't know if my reputation is good enough that you guys can tell me to do something different now, but too late. I'll worry about that later. Not only am I changing the slides, but I'm also changing the style. So today's style will be different. When we get to a passage like Matthew 8, there's not always a lot of big, deep discussion in this section. There's a few controversies that they're not really that big, and we might address some of them, we might not. I will be covering Matthew 8, 1 through 17, dealing with when Christ... I don't want to give too much away yet, because it's going to be Trivia Sunday, okay? And it changed everything. Underneath that says the verse. That's not a mess up. But today we're going to do a Trivia Sunday. So the way this game's going to work, it's going to be kind of fun, maybe. I don't know. We'll find out. If you're offended, that's all right. I have Vanna White here is going to give everyone, not everyone, I only have so many whiteboards, so she's going to kind of distribute them amongst groups. And so I have about 8 of these maybe. They're from my school. They're the only ones that didn't have bad words written on the back of them. Kidding. Okay. I did have once a table that had a bad word underneath it, but it was spelt wrong, so it wasn't really a bad word, I guess. As Vanna comes around, she's going to give a group. You might have to turn around and work with the people around you. Okay, you have this whiteboard that you're going to be able to put your answers on. So think of it like the final round of Jeopardy over and over again. Okay, but you don't have to put your answer in the form of a question because we're not playing Jeopardy. Okay, but we will you can keep track of your own points. Okay. As a good teacher, I left my candy jar at home. So, and plus, I think we're all pretty full from the snack time. My wife fed you food. I will feed you with the word. Okay? They can take it out of the plastic. Those are the cheap ones. All right, so welcome to Trivia Sunday. We are going to have a blast studying Scripture, learning about Matthew chapter 8. Today's categories. Okay, today's categories, we'll be doing a review first. Then we'll be studying leprosy, centurions, mother-in-laws, and healings and more. Okay, so these will be the categories for today. So let's begin with the review question. Okay, so what you'll do is you'll write your answer on the board. I'll give you about a minute if you want to talk about it. You can do that as a team. I always tell my students, if they're loud, they're basically giving their answers away to the enemy. So you might want to whisper when you do it. This is not for a grade. Oh, there you go. Now half you won't do it. Okay. But this is worth 100 points. First question. Okay. What is the traditional name of the sermon that Jesus just finished preaching while on a mountain? This was 2 weeks ago. I wrapped up this message. Okay. And we had spent half a year studying this sermon. Okay. I didn't want to give it away. Okay. All right. So if you have the answer, hold it up. All right, it appears most of you have chosen Sermon on the Mount, okay? And when I spoke on Sermon on the Mount, we had this theme that went through the whole sermon, and it had to do with being a disciple of Jesus Christ. For those who would follow him, the King, okay, those who would be willing to be his disciple. And Matthew 5:20 was my theme verse for the Sermon on the Mount. It says, "For I say to you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven." So from Matthew 5:20 all the way to the end of the Sermon on the Mount, which ends in chapter 7, Christ goes over various disciples or various righteous acts, I guess. I don't want to call them acts because it was all about how your heart was. Okay? And so he went beyond the law. Okay? It wasn't just about following the law, but it was about changing you as a person. Okay? And about following Christ. You know, the law says do not murder. Christ would say do not hate. So you kind of have that transcendence of the law that we have. Okay. Next question, review. This one's worth 300 points. Okay, it's not as easy as the first one. And if you weren't here 2 weeks ago, you may have missed it. Okay. The next question. Why were people amazed at the teaching of Jesus? It's a little bit harder. It's a 300-pointer right here. By the way, if you feel you get the answer close enough, that's okay. If you feel that I kind of said it, we need a new marker back here. That marker can be thrown away. Or if you ever go to stand up and go like this a lot, okay, and it'll start working. If he does, make sure we point the camera to him when he does that. All right, let's see your answers if you have it. Oh. All right. All right, so at the end of Matthew chapter 7, he says, Matthew writes, when Jesus finished these words, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one having authority, not as their scribes. Okay? So he had just finished teaching, and all these people were amazed at the way that he taught. He taught with authority. He didn't teach like the Pharisees or the scribes. He didn't teach like them. Okay, but instead he spoke with authority. And what we're going to find in the next couple chapters, Matthew 8 and 9, we're going to start to see Christ's authority. We're going to see it demonstrated. So it's interesting. He said these words to them, and they're like, oh, these are different. There's something special about these. He's then going to perform a series of miracles that's going to prove his authority. It's going to back up his message. Now, in the next 2 chapters, there's about 10 miracles that are performed by Christ. Okay? And they're pretty much broken up into 3 sections. You'll have I think 3, then 3, then 4. Or is it 4, 3, 4, 3? I know I have 3 this week. But all 3 of these sections will demonstrate Christ's authority while relating to his call of discipleship. Okay? So each of these miracles or sections, there's miracles being performed, but there's also a call of discipleship, a common theme that you'll see, okay, kind of hidden in the middle of the series of miracles. And we'll be looking at them over the next couple weeks. But we're going to start with the first 3. Now, as you read this, I'm going to deal with a issue of contention sometimes with some people, is you will sometimes have the other Gospels, and I know we've talked about this before, the other Gospels will have a slightly different narrative, okay? And I think we need to, if you go to Luke and Mark, you'll see these miracles also. As we read this, I want you to remember that the authors of the Gospels were not merely just recorders of events. They weren't just reporters, okay? They were authors, and they had a purpose when writing, okay? And they had a message they were trying to portray to their readers, okay? And we see they're very different in each of the books. And so we'll come across, there's a couple of them over the next 2 chapters that Mark and Luke might go into more detail on. And so, whereas Matthew is he's kind of just summarizing what happened and goes into less detail because Matthew has this message he's trying to portray about discipleship and following Christ. So I want you to keep that in mind if you say, oh, wait a second, in Luke, this happens with the centurion, okay? It's slightly different. Well, but Matthew is really giving just an abbreviated version of it, of the same events that Luke does. So don't look for issues that might not be there because you might be thinking of them as just merely people recording events without any purpose at all, but they did. So keep that in mind as we study these passages. So let's begin to get into our text, but we're going to go to our next category, which is leprosy. So this will be the first miracle that we will deal with, will be the healing of the leprous man. So if you want to look at Matthew chapter 8. Okay, this is an open book test, by the way. So it's not a test, it's a game. Yeah, that's what we tell the kids. Okay. So you can refer to any notes you have to answer any of the questions. Okay. But in Matthew 8, 1-4, we'll start there. It says, when Jesus came down from the mountain, large crowds followed him. And a leper came to him and bowed down before him and said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, I am willing, be cleansed. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. And Jesus said to him, see that you tell no one, but go show yourself to the priests and present the offering that Moses commanded as a testimony to them. So after Jesus spoke the Sermon on the Mount, he comes down the mountain, and there's crowds following him. We don't know how many, and this leper comes. We also don't know if the crowd was still there when the leper came, so you just don't know that information. But you picture this leper coming to him, and he asks to be clean, and Jesus cleanses him. Okay, but let's see how much you were paying attention. Okay, leprosy for 200. Okay. The question is, what must a person do if he tested positive for leprosy? There are multiple answers for this one, so you don't have to list all of them. What does someone with leprosy have to do? I have some clue words in there too. All right, I think people are finishing. They can hold up their sign. 300. Oh, no, 200, sorry. Since I accept almost any answer as the correct one. Okay. All right, good. Oh, we got no answer. He writes small, so I can't see it. Okay. So if you went, does anybody know, just bonus points, what chapter they can go to find out the law of leprosy? That's right. Good job. Okay. Someone's got class reference. Okay. So in Leviticus 13 and 14, it talks about what a leper, was supposed to do if they found themselves having a spot on their skin. And you can go in and just read all the details. It was really, it says if it's this happens. If this happens, this happened. But they had to go to the priest. Okay, and it was the priest's determination as to whether this was actually a leprosy, and if the priest did test him positive for leprosy, okay, this is what it says in Leviticus that he had to do. As for the leper who has the infection, his clothes shall be torn, and the hair of his head shall be uncovered, and he shall cover his mustache. Okay, I guess some people don't have to worry about that. And cry, unclean, unclean. So he has to cover his mustache like this, unclean, unclean. He shall remain unclean all the days during which he has the infection. He is unclean. He shall live alone. His dwelling shall be outside the camp. So that's right. They had to separate, and they had to let everyone know that they had leprosy. They had to, okay, and that's what the word I was thinking of that Rigo put down. They had to quarantine, okay? Now, if they weren't sure, first they had to isolate just for 7 days, okay? Now, does this sound kind of familiar to anyone? Okay? Now, I'm not saying I'm drawing a connection, but I will, okay? We feel like we've lived through this, but with the COVID disease that came upon our world, as you know, we had to, if you got exposed, you had to isolate. If you were sick, you had to quarantine. You had to let people know, contact trace, and all this thing you had to do when you had the COVID, okay? Very similar to leprosy, okay? I can imagine, if a family member got leprosy, members of their family might have been like, hey, I'm going to put you out. You're not coming in this house anymore. And I imagine some people even felt that way with the COVID when, family got sick and you're like, oh, stay away. Yeah, I've heard lots of things where the dad or the mom will be up in their room for 2 weeks, okay, as to not expose the rest of the family. And so all of us have been impacted by that in some way. So I felt like this kind of fits into what we're living today, okay? And so when Jesus came down, there was this leper, okay? And this leper, it's interesting, okay? He calls him Lord and bows down before him. And here you see the leper recognizing that Christ has authority, okay? And you see the leper, and when it says bow down, it's a sign of worship. Now, typically the word Lord can be just a polite gesture to someone like, hey, sir, or it can be someone to address someone with great respect and authority. And here, based on he's also bowing down, it goes beyond just a formal respect, but actually as a recognition of Christ's authority and even his ability to cleanse him. Now, we'll find it kind of interesting. Okay, and some of these things I'll say may seem out of order, but did you notice that a leper doesn't get healed? Have you ever noticed that before? That a leper gets cleansed? Okay? Because when he went to the priest, okay, and he was found to have leprosy, not only was he socially outcast from people, he was declared unclean, which had a spiritual ramification to it. And it was Christ, okay, who can make this person clean again. Okay? Next leprosy question for 500 points is a big one, as in major point, okay, worth major points. Okay, really, this next question is probably the one reason that I'm happy to be able to teach on this verse, because it's a verse that has meant a lot to me over the past 2 years, dealing with our form of leprosy that we've dealt with, okay? And you'll probably get this. I'm sure you noticed it, okay? It says, what powerful gesture did Jesus do right before he healed the leper? Man, I really can't see back there. All right. Levi's looking it up. He Googled it. Not Rigo, Levi. Levi Googled it. All right. It says Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him. Okay? This one verse, okay? This one verse 2 years ago, became almost my theme verse. Okay, and this is why, because as a country, as we were dealing with the disease, I remember in May or June, okay, we were probably right in the middle of it. A lot of worries by people. Okay, now when Jesus reached out and touched him, he risked being by society an outcast. He risked ceremoniously being an outcast, okay, by defiling himself when he touched him. I mean, he seriously risked exposure when he did this. However, okay, love took precedence over all of that. And so I remember back in 2 years ago, right in the midst of all this, there was a friend who needed some help, okay? And I'm not going to go into details because I don't want people to feel bad if they didn't help this person. But a friend needed help, and someone in his family was sick. Okay? I mean, we knew, especially last year, any symptom meant it was COVID, right? Okay, or a possibility. And this friend needed help with something. He needed it that weekend, and that was the last time. I mean, that's when he needed it. And when people found out that someone in his house was sick, people started saying, "No, I'm not coming. I'm not going to come and help you." And I just remembered this verse. You might say, what would Jesus have done? Okay? And, Jesus reached out and touched the leper to help him. And so I just remember this verse, and I don't want to make anyone feel guilty if they didn't help someone, because, you might have, been over the years of 80, okay? Not quite there yet. And you might not, and the risk was really there and you're being extra cautious, but, okay, he was willing to reach out and touch him, and he took that risk because of his love. Now, thankfully, a lot of people were able to help this brother in need, okay, and I just remember thinking during that time, okay, whenever someone talked to me about, oh, you're really going to go help that person, or you're gonna do this, or you're gonna actually go to a church that is meeting in person. Okay, you're gonna do that, and it's like Jesus reached out and touched the leper. Okay, I can reach out to other people also and help them. And so this was kind of my favorite verse during that time. Okay, when people questioned me on why I was doing things, like Jesus would do it. Okay, now difference with Jesus, okay, than myself, is Jesus can offer the healing. Okay, when Jesus touched the man, he did not contract leprosy. Okay, in fact, the man received health. Okay, it says that when he cleansed him, it says, first he says, see that you tell no one, but then he says, go to the priest and present the offering that Moses commanded as a testimony to them. If you read Leviticus 14, it goes into if someone sought to be declared cleansed, okay, they need to go get a negative test from the priest. And so they would go to the priest, and he would declare them cleansed, and they had to give an offering. They had, it was the one that took 2 days long. Okay, 7 days outside the camp before they come back, and give an offering. And he wanted the man, though. Okay, 2 things that he did was he told him to keep it secret. Okay, now it may have been a time that Jesus didn't want the news about him to spread, because then he would only be seen as a wonder miracle maker, okay, rather than the Messiah who was coming to save people from their sins. But then he also sent him to show to the priest that he was indeed cleansed. And so, on a side note, don't want to get into this too much, but leprosy is often you can see a comparison of that in sin. And there's nothing that we can do about our sin, but except for go to Christ. That's the only thing. So there's a little side note there if you want to dwell on that for a minute. And when he reaches out and touches us, okay, we are cleansed. And we also see that, we're not cleansed by our own ability, but I often think of, our health that we have is from Christ. Our righteousness is from Christ, not of our own. So, but anyways, at this point, he's showing his authority, okay? And this further will show, okay, and we'll get into this a little bit later, his testimony to them as Messiah. And here's something that he does in Matthew 11. It talks about this. It says, the blind receive sight and the lame walk, and the lepers are cleansed and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up and the poor have the gospel preached to them. And blessed is he who does not take offense at me. Christ even says, this is the sign of the Messiah, that I give sight, I help the lame to walk, and then he even says he helps the leper, he cleanses the lepers. So we have that there. After meeting with the leper, he's going to come across another individual, a centurion. Okay? Now, if you don't know what a centurion is, he's a soldier. Commands about 100 soldiers, reports to the governing body, probably Herod at that time. And it says that when he entered Capernaum, that was going to be a trivia question, but it's not. You got lucky on that one. A centurion came to him, imploring him and saying, Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home, fearfully tormented. Jesus said to him, I will come and heal him. But the centurion said, Lord, I am not worthy of you to come under my roof, but just say the word and my servant will be healed. This is the longest section. For I also am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. And I say to this one, go, and he goes. And to another, come, and he comes. And to my slave, do this, and he does it. Now when Jesus heard this, he marveled and said to those who were following, truly I say to you, I have not found such great faith with anyone in Israel. I say to you that many will come from east and west and recline at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the sons of the kingdom will be cast out into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And Jesus said to the centurion, go, it shall be done for you, as you have believed. And the servant was healed that very moment. All right, see if you were paying attention. We'll give you an easy one. 100-point question. Get ready. Okay? All right, you might have already gotten this. It's the easy one. What does the centurion call Jesus when he meets him? What title does he use? Good use of proper capitalization. Okay. Jeremiah, though, went a little step further. Jeremiah, you're wrong because of your capital letters, by the way. He was screaming, yeah. He was yelling the answer out. All right. So it says in Matthew 8:5, and saying, Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home, fearfully tormented. Now again, the word Lord can necessarily or could necessarily just be a polite way of introducing. Like, hello, sir. Okay, something like that. However, based upon the way the centurion talks, he's speaking to him as someone who has authority, because the centurion recognizes that authority. In fact, he repeats it. In verse 8, he says, Lord, and then says, I am not worthy for you to come under my roof. What happens is Christ, or he says, my servant is paralyzed, or, and by reading the other gospels, you see that this paralyzation was pretty much almost to the brink of death. Okay? So he's got this severely paralyzed servant who he has this close relationship with, and And he comes to Jesus and he says in verse 9, "For I also am a man under authority." He recognizes that Christ has authority, okay? And then he tells them, okay, don't worry. Hey, you don't need to come to my house. Just say the word. Now, it's very interesting, okay? If you go back and you read, if you go back and read it in Greek where he says, "I will go and see him," okay? He really is, some say that it might have been a question. Should I come and see him? Because the centurion didn't really ask anything. He just tells him, "My servant is paralyzed." And he said, "Should I come to your house?" Which, if you didn't know the culture, would have been a very, very, interesting situation if Jesus came to the centurion's house. Jesus is a Jew going to this Gentile's house, not only a Gentile, but a part of the Roman centurions, which we know there were some issues there. But, again, willing to risk even the ceremonial uncleanness or the society to go heal the servant. So he's like, "Am I supposed to come to your house? You desire me to come to your house and heal them?" And he says, "No, you don't have to come to my house. Just say the word." He trusts in just the word. Which brings me to another question worth 200 points. Okay, this will be the driving point of this section. What did Jesus, I probably wrote the typo. What did Jesus marvel about the centurion? There's actually, I think, 2 times that Jesus marvels about someone else, And they both had to do with pretty much the same thing. One was having it, one was for not having it. It says in verse 10, he marveled, and said to those who were following, "Truly I say to you, I have not found such great faith with anyone in Israel." I've not found such great faith with anyone in Israel. Oh, bonus question. I'm throwing this one in there, because I really want to drive a point home. It's multiple choice, Which of the following fits with this story? Is it faith, not race? Pride, not in my house? Greed, letting go? Or is it actually race, meaning Jews only? Have one. Those are your 4 choices. What fits best? Which of the following fits with this story? Sure. Some people don't do well with multiple choice questions, apparently. They were always my best. Your Bible. All right. Faith. It was the answer to the last question. The same thing. It was faith, not race. See, the problem with the people is they thought that because they were Jews, they had certain guarantees. And they also thought the people who were not Jews had nothing to do with it. And so Jesus gives some very interesting words in 11 and 12, where he points out that it's about faith, not your race, that has to do with his kingdom. Because he says, "I say to you that many will come from east and west and recline at the table with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob in the kingdom of heaven." When he gives this phrase, he's saying it's going to be people from all over the world, not just the Jews. Which may be upsetting to some people. But then he goes even further and says, "But the sons of the kingdom." Now, who were the sons of the kingdom? They were the people who thought that they were heirs to the kingdom of heaven, the Jews. To those whom by birth thought they deserved or got all the blessings, Okay, and that they would be with the kingdom of heaven. But it says, but the sons of the kingdom will be cast out into the outer darkness. In that place, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. We can talk about that some other time of what that is, but you kind of get the picture. Okay? And what he's saying is, he marvels at this centurion, this non-Jew, at his faith. And then says, there's going to be many people from all over the world who will be reclining at the table of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. And then even so much that those who, and he basically says, and there will be Jews who don't. Because it's not about your race. It's about your faith. And that you have faith in Jesus Christ. Amen. Now this next topic, I tread lightly, okay, in case she watches the video. Okay, mother-in-laws and how to handle them. Okay. This one only covered 2 verses, and you may think that it kind of sticks in there for no apparent reason, but I was able to come up with a couple reasons in there, and I also read some people who did too, and that helped. But it says in Matthew 8:14, when Jesus came into Peter's home, he saw his mother-in-law lying sick in bed with a fever. He touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she got up and waited on him. So here you have, so far he's gone to a leper, someone who was sick, an outcast. And then he goes to, the centurion, who may have been someone who, or someone who was a soldier, with authority. Then he goes to a mother-in-law, And the first question, worth 100 points, where does this miracle take place? All right, good. That was incorrect. I have no idea what he wrote. All right. It says he came into Peter's home. Now, I find this interesting that Peter has a home. Because oftentimes when we thought of the disciples, we thought they were people who just gave up absolutely everything to follow Christ. Not saying that Peter didn't give up things, but we sometimes think that to become a Christian or to follow Christ, that it's a matter of, a self-denial monk-like lifestyle where you do away with everything, no house, no nothing, Now, Christ does talk about having that attitude where those things aren't important, but it's interesting that Peter has a home, and yet still is following Christ. And so it's kind of as a message to us, that even while you have a home, even while you have these things, you can still follow Christ. You can still be his disciple. And, Peter actually, I think he kept his fishing supplies too, because he uses those later. So he couldn't give that up, I guess, his fishing. All right. This next one is worth only 100? Oh man, this is a hard question. It should have been 5. Oh, it's 100. I'm sticking to it. Copy and paste. Forgot to change the number. All right. How does healing the mother-in-law, I keep adding the word "the" in random places. How does healing the mother-in-law relate to the previous miracles? Ooh, it's a hard one. And there's 2 answers. Some of you are kind of right. Kind of. Now, first you might say, and I'll give you half credit, that he touched her hand. Because he did that with the first one too. He didn't touch the second one at all. He didn't even go in the same room. He did it from a distance. But here's something that's interesting that can connect these 3 miracles together. All 3 of these people you might call, and I don't want to say this word because I don't like this word, but all three of the people were part of a marginalized group. You had the sick person, the outcast from society, okay? The guy with leprosy. You had the Roman, the centurion, who the Jews wanted nothing to do with, okay? And then the last one, okay, you might say that during this time, there were issues with gender. And this was a woman, okay? And it just shows us, I mean, what does it teach us, okay? All three of these people, in some way, may have been excluded by the culture, okay? Whether physically, race, or gender. But not to Jesus, okay? Jesus restored all of them, in each of them, okay? And it doesn't matter. There's no one, okay, that is out of reach of God's love, okay? It says he says he sent his son for the world. He loved the world, okay? And so it should be a lesson to us also, okay, on how we treat others. I find it interesting that it says that she got up and waited on him, okay? That term there just means she got some food and provided, okay? And it's, if you might say, well, I can't believe that she did that. It's the same thing the angels did, same word used with the angels did after the temptation. It says the angels ministered to him, okay? They gave him food. So, but what I find interesting about this is here she has this fever. Okay, I don't know how many of you guys have ever had a fever before. You've heard about when the fever breaks or when the fever's gone, okay? You don't just pop up and be like, woo, I'm good to go. You know, you're more like, okay, I'm out of bed. I'm walking around feeling a little bit better, okay? No, it says she got up and just started working, or she had strength. She was fully restored. She didn't need time to recover at all, okay? And you see the completeness of Jesus' healing to the mother-in-law. And that same way goes with us spiritually. We have a complete healing through Christ. I know you guys are looking at your clocks, probably done tired of the game, but I still got a couple more questions. And this is the final round, healings and more. It's kind of like a wild card, okay? Because you might be looking at these next verses and you just see everything is included. It says, when evening came, so we're in one day. Okay, how many of you guys have ever seen The Chosen TV series? Okay, we're working our way through. We're on the second season, so don't spoil anything. Although I kind of know what happens at the end. I read the book. But anyways, I love that time where, you know, he's with the crowds and he's doing all those healings, and the disciples are back at the camp and they're having this conversation. Kind of a boring episode because, you know, Jesus wasn't in that much. But you have they're talking, and you know, Jesus often does miracles, and he comes back. I don't know if you've seen this episode. I'm kind of spoiling. And if you notice when he comes back, he's exhausted. Okay? And I just love that picture of what he did in one day. Okay? And all the people that he was helping. And you also see his humanity there, that it may have been tiring. But this is maybe where this comes from. It says, when evening came, they brought to him many who were demon-possessed, and he cast out the spirits with a word, and he healed all who were ill. This was to fulfill what was spoken through Isaiah the prophet. He himself took our infirmities and carried away our diseases. All right, so this one's worth 1,000 points. Okay, got your attention, didn't I? Okay, this is what you do with kids. You make it low points, and at the end you make a bunch of points, get them excited. Okay, but remember, you are judging your own answers if you feel you get it correct. I was doing something this last 2 weeks ago, and it was math though, and a student was like I walked by, he's like answering some equation, and he's like, I have no clue. Okay, so then we get back and I say the answer, show him how to do it. He goes, that's what I had. Like, what? I was just by you. He goes, well, I just randomly picked a number and that was it. I was like, no, you didn't. Okay, but this is church, so we'll see how you do. All right. This is a question. Remember, multiple answers are possible. Okay? What do these miracles reveal to us about Jesus? Now, if using wisdom, you can put more than one thing down, and if you want to give yourself credit. If you want to see the verse again, what do all these miracles? You can include the ones we've already talked about, but you can also include any of them or all these miracles. Does anybody want to share their answer? I mean, there's a lot. His compassion, his purpose, his authority, his willing to heal all. You changed it. He is God, okay? Fulfill prophecy, okay? The miracles showed the prophetic ministry, or the prophecy of his ministry, okay? His power, his role. Sorry, guys in the back, I can't see that far, okay? I don't have my glasses on. I never wear them, okay? Yeah, so a lot of those things kind of sum up what we've been talking about. Why do we have these miracles in Matthew chapter 8? Okay, you see his authority from what he had just done. You see that he had the ministry that was prophesied about. Okay, you see that he was willing to reach out to these marginalized groups of people. Okay. He's just not a savior for the rich and wealthy. He came to the poor. Okay? He helped them. He brought them the gospel. Okay? And then finally, last question, another 1,000-point question in case you felt like you didn't get another 1,000. Okay? Because it's a little bit harder. I have more pens. How does Matthew use the Isaiah 53 passage to summarize this section? How does he use Isaiah 53? You shouldn't have erased your answer. I think you had it on the last. And if you want, I will put both of those up there. Okay? And including the passage that comes from Isaiah 53, verse 4. So I saw a bunch of people put down to fulfill the prophecy. Okay? Now it's interesting, Isaiah 53, verse 4. Surely our griefs he himself bore, and our sorrows he carried away. And when he says this, he says, as Matthew quotes it, he took our infirmities and carried away our diseases. Okay? Gives a paraphrase of it. But it's interesting, Isaiah 53, if you read it, this is probably how you would read it in the Hebrew. I'm not a Hebrew expert. But in Septuagint, which was the Greek translation of the Hebrew, they kind of did they took it more of as not a literal healing, but they, I think, used the word sin, okay, instead of infirmities, or they say iniquities. And so here you have this almost, I don't want to say double meaning, because that's not true. Levi thought I was going to say that. But you have this application. He came and he took away the disease. Okay? He healed people. A part of his ministry was the healing of people, taking their griefs away, their sorrows away. Okay? And he does that for us today. Okay? But our sorrows, our grief came from our sin. Okay? It came from our life without God. And he took that away. Okay? And how did he do that? Okay? Well, Matthew 50 or Isaiah 53, this rest of the verse says, if you think of his ministry, he's healed people, carried their sorrows away. But then it says, yet we ourselves esteemed him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. And he went to the cross. He went to the cross to deal with that ultimate illness, that ultimate infirmity, the disease of sin. And he took the punishment for it. And he paid the price for it so that our griefs were borne by him, our sorrows he carried away, and we have a new life with him. So we see here his authority to heal people of their diseases. We see, that he himself is God. We talked about that this morning. But we also see, that this one with authority not only had the authority, we didn't cover this passage, to heal people, but he also had the authority to forgive sins because he paid the price for it. So I hope this was an encouragement to you, yet fun in a way, maybe. And maybe you learned something about Matthew chapter 8. It's a great passage, especially during a pandemic where we need to reach out, help people, and love takes precedence over that. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you for this opportunity we have to look at your word, to enjoy it, to spend time together reflecting on it. I pray that this message of Christ and his ministry will mean something to us, that we'll see the application of faith that we see in this chapter, and also of love and the willingness that Christ had to maybe go against the status quo and heal people that people might not have thought were worthy to be healed. I pray this will encourage us to reach out to people also, to find someone who may need love and maybe need to be told about the faith that they can have in Jesus Christ to forgive them of their sins. I thank you for this time again. I pray that we'll enjoy our week and meet back together next week, Lord willing. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.